it's popular because it's popular or whatever. For me, that's not why it's popular. Like, I really enjoyed having this card as a kid. It was a very rare card back in the day. It was a very playable card back in the day that got destroyed by a lot of us who used it in our decks. Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to the Parkside Merchant channel. I've got a very special announcement today that I wanted to share with everybody. After several months of very careful work, basically, and effort, I have decided to formally kick off my PSA registry set. So my first ever registry set with PSA being the Legacy of Darkness first edition set from vintage Yugioh. So it's pretty exciting. I never really thought when I got back into this stuff around the summertime or so last year that I would be buying a lot of PSA cards, let alone starting a registry set, right? But one thing leads to another, and I did finally decide to get started with a formal registry set on the PSA website. So I wanted to just spend a couple minutes talking a bit about how I came to the decision to do this, and to actually just talk a little bit about some of the cards that I have in the registry set so far. Maybe just as some background if people aren't familiar with the registry set. So basically, if you have a lot of graded cards from PSA, they have a service on their website where you can basically in a database enter each of the cards that you have with the certification numbers, and you can keep track of all your stuff, and you can also do this on a set by set basis. And what PSA does is they have dedicated sets. Currently I'm looking at the Legacy of Darkness set here from first edition for the Yugioh category, but they've obviously got hundreds and thousands of different sets across all the different sports cards and Pokemon sets and everything else. And it's kind of a fun way just to keep track of your stuff, to compete against other collectors that are also interested in the same sets, and to ultimately showcase the things that you have in your collection. Some of these cards, as folks know, there's only like, a handful of copies in the world that are PSA 10s. So it is kind of fun sometimes to see publicly who's got what and who are the different collectors involved in each of these different collection areas. So why did I get started with this, you may ask? Well, over the past almost 9 months now, I got started doing this towards the end of the summer last year. I've been collecting, grading, buying up a lot of PSA graded cards, and a lot of those cards have been in the Legacy of Darkness set. I happen to like the set a lot, and over time, I think at some point towards the end of last year, I said to myself, look, I'm buying up all these Legacy of Darkness first edition cards. I really like the set. I have a ton of the commons that are sitting around that are in very good condition. The commons are also very cheap to buy. At least last year when I was buying a lot of cards, they're pretty cheap to buy up, even in raw format, a lot of the commons. So you can sometimes find mint condition or near mint condition stuff. And again, a lot of my heavy buying was done towards like Q3, Q4 of last year, when you could still buy up a lot of this stuff. And there were still a lot of new people entering the market and listing new stuff on eBay that wasn't yet sent to PSA and hadn't yet been graded. So I kind of lucked out in a lot of respects when prices were lower, and I was still able to submit a lot of the commons and a lot of these things to PSA before this whole backlog and all this stuff started to choke up. In any case, I'm kind of getting off topic, but I got started with this because I have a lot of Legacy of Darkness cards. I really like the Legacy of Darkness set for several reasons. From a collection standpoint, this was like peak Yu-Gi-Oh for me when I was a kid. Obviously, Metal Raiders and Legend of Blue Eyes, people are always going to say that those are the most OG, the most interesting, which they are. I mean, it is the oldest sets, and a lot of those cards are familiar and very interesting. But as far as like when I was really getting into the swing of things, really playing the game the most, when it was most popular, at least in my community as a kid, which was around the 2003 time frame or so when the Legacy of Darkness stuff was hitting the shelves. When I looked back at my old collection from last summer when I was reopening my old box of old stuff, there was a lot of Legacy of Darkness cards in there. And that for me is just like the most kind of mainstay, OG, original set from the 11. I mean, everyone's going to have a different opinion about this. For some people, Ancient Sanctuary is their favorite because that's when they really started to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! For other people, Metal Raiders is their favorite because it's one of the biggest sets. Everybody had those cards back in the day. Everybody knows those cards and recognizes those cards. It's a very nostalgic set. It's kind of hard to argue, actually, that Metal Raiders is one of the better sets from the first 11. But at least for me, Legacy of Darkness, I really like a lot of the cards that I'm going to show you from my collection. And I just really like the set. It's a good set. It's got a lot of very playable, very game-changing cards that were part of this series that they launched in 2003. The cards look good. I like a lot of the artwork. It's got a lot of very interesting style. A lot of dragon-themed cards in here. You've got a lot of these like almost cyber kind of like just dark. I mean, it's Legacy of Darkness, and there's like a cyber element to it because a lot of these were the cards that Noah played with from this, I think it was the third season, right after Battle City, when they were on that submarine vessel with Noah and they were dealing with his father, Gozaburo Kaiba. There was like a lot of those cyberspace kind of themes that are also in the artworks here. It's just a cool looking set for me. It's got the spirit monsters as well, which are kind of fun, so there's a lot going for it from a collector's angle. Now, from a investment angle, it's also a pretty attractive set, right? One of the things that I said to myself last year was, I don't want to be investing in cards that have a very decent chance of somebody showing up with like just loads of them in a near mint condition and messing up the population. For example, flooding the market with 50 mint condition injection fairy lilies. That would be a bad thing for people that own a PSA 10 or a PSA 9 first edition injection fairy lily. The good news about Legacy of Darkness is that because of all those production issues that it had with centering, scuff marks, right? All the print lines and things that you have on a lot of these, there's almost no chance. Even if somebody comes out of the woodwork with like a pallet of boxes of Legacy of Darkness, there's only going to be so many injection fairy lilies in those boxes, so many tyrant dragons, so many yadas, and only so many of those are going to be well centered and actually grade a 10. So especially with Genimint now, like using computer vision, to detect centering, like this is like one of the safest sets to throw your money into. Again, my opinion, I'm not a financial advisor, but there's almost no chance that like somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and mess up the pop reports here on these cards. So I just bent your ear, folks, on a whole bunch of reasons why I like the Legacy of Darkness set from a sort of collection perspective, from an investment perspective. As you can see here, it's also kind of like a frontier, if you will, of the vintage 11 sets. Like if you look, for example, and I'll just show you this for a second here. If we take a look at like Metal Raiders as an example, or like Legend of Blue Eyes, right? What you'll see, not Blue Eyes. What you'll see that's interesting, folks, is there's actually quite a bit of competition in some of these sets. Like there are a lot of people in Legend of Blue Eyes who have completed a first edition LOB set, 100% complete, 10 GPA, which means that it's like a bunch of 10s. They don't have a lot of 9s in there. With bonuses, like how many of those cards get a bonus because it's like a pop 1 of 1, top pop in the top category is how you get those kind of ratings. But the reason I share this is I did think about doing like, well, maybe I could just do a Metal Raider set, or maybe I should do an LOB set. And look, maybe I will at some point make a foray into one of these sets, but they're already pretty well covered. A lot of people have done these, and it's kind of a been there, done that kind of achievement in the collection space. And so for me, I'm kind of a newer entrant here in the Yu-Gi-Oh collection community, and so I figured, look, I'm not just going to be a kind of an also ran kind of product here and do the same thing that everybody else has done here in LOB. And you can see with Metal Raiders, a lot of people have basically done the same thing, except I don't know that there's 100% yet. I think somebody has a 96 or something. But I figured, hey, look, Legacy of Darkness is one of those sets that you've got to be a real hardcore collector to try and do this, because if you're going to do this at 100% and you're going to grade all these commons, you've got to have a really good eye for centering. You've got to be like a really savvy collector to do this. You've also got to be kind of crazy because like you're going to waste a ton of money on a whole bunch of crap that's going to be not grading well, right? It's a hard set to do in 100%, let alone 100% at a 10, right? As you can see here, I'm running like a 9.6 right now on the GPA that's weighted. And I'll show you my cards here in a second, but this is like a lifelong, maybe not a lifelong sort of process, but it's going to take a heck of a long time for me to get this thing to 100% and to get it at a 10 GPA. Like, I don't even know if it's possible. I've kind of settled for the fact that I've got a couple cards that I will never get in a 10 grade just because it's going to be too hard. But enough talking about kind of background. How about we go ahead and look at my set here, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the cards that I have. So as you can see, I do have the PSA 10, and actually I might be able to do a like a slideshow here. Yeah, here we go. So I have 16 cards currently inputted in here. This is the first one. I actually picked this up on eBay a couple of weeks ago, actually probably about a month and a half now. It's been a while. I have a separate video about it that I'll post a link on. I bought this at like a pretty high price, and it didn't like stick in the sold listings on eBay, so it's kind of like a pretty unknown transaction in the community, but it's a pretty big deal, and it is a pretty new cert number for this PSA 10. So this is a good one. I have another one at PSA currently right now that I think is going to get maybe like a PSA 9, maybe an 8, and it happened to be a childhood copy that I had in a binder, so maybe I'll get lucky and it'll grade like a pretty good number, but I have a feeling it's going to get a pretty bad grade because they're getting really tough on centering. But at least I've got a 10. So this is a big card. It's one of the ace cards from this set, and I do have this in a PSA 10. Next up, we have the Dark Ruler Hades, or Hades, as some people like to say it. This is actually not a terribly expensive card. I don't remember spending a ton of money on this one. I think I bought this maybe in like December or maybe January or so. So I've had this one for a while. I've got a Freed the Matchless General. You do see it come up from time to time. I think I got this one from Troll and Toad, if I'm not mistaken. So they do come up occasionally. I saw one recently actually that I think was up for auction or was for sale. So it's a gettable card. Next up, we have a reinforcement of the army here. I kind of overpaid for this one, if I recall correctly. I also pulled one of these raw from the box break that Vintage Yugioh did about a month and a half ago. So I'm going to have one of these at PSA pretty soon that I think is also probably going to grade a 10. So I'll have a backup of this probably. Okay, here we go. This card, folks, is essentially the, in my opinion, it is the ace card of my Legacy of Darkness collection. The Luster Dragon, first edition PSA 10, I think has a pop of about 7 or 8 cards in PSA 10 that exist in the world. This one went up for sale in December of 2020, and I purchased it within seconds of when it was listed because I knew this would be one of the last times that it would ever be available in a buy it now format at a reasonable price. And I picked this up for, I think it was several $100s to purchase it. But folks, like, I don't know, like if you wanted to buy this card, I don't even know where you would start. You'd probably start with the list of people on the registry set, and you'd ask a couple of these guys if they'd be willing to part with it. None of them will. There may be 1 or 2 other copies kicking around that are not entered in a registry set currently, but this is a card that you cannot get in PSA 10. You just can't get it. I don't even know, like, if I wanted to buy another one, how I would do it. Ditto for Tyrant Dragon, by the way, which we're going to get to in a second. I've been knocking on doors on Instagram for a while trying to get one of those in PSA 10. It's impossible. But in any case, I love this card. Everybody remembers this card because it was a super rare. It means almost everybody had a copy of it. The centering on these is notoriously terrible. There have been over, I think, almost 70 or 80 copies of this card, and I just submitted about another 10 of them earlier this year in first edition that were gradable. But I mean, it's like, this is a very difficult card to get in a PSA 10. There's only about 7 or 8 of them that have graded 10 out of the 70 or 80 or so that have been submitted. So it's almost like 10% or less of what you submit grades a PSA 10. So good luck, folks. If you like this card, I mean, for me, this card is more valuable to me than an injection Fairy Lily or a Yatagarasu, because if you want a Lily or you want a Yatagarasu, you can get it. They come up for auction occasionally. You can buy it. You could knock on doors and people will probably part with one from time to time. With something that only has 7 copies, and they're all in the hands of people that are like big collectors, they're YouTubers, right? They're people that are really big on Instagram and stuff like that. These guys aren't going to sell those things. I'm not going to sell this anytime soon. You could debate me on this. Sure, maybe there's a debate to be had about it, but this is one of those cards that I am especially proud to have locked down about 7 months ago in December of last year. All right, next up we have a copy of Fiber Jar in PSA 10. This card, if I'm not mistaken, has actually become more and more difficult to get. I purchased this one from somebody in Europe, I think last year, and it was pretty expensive then, and it's just been getting more and more difficult to purchase as a PSA 10. So I love the artwork on this card. I mean, this is one of the most interesting, fascinating artworks for me in Legacy of Darkness. It's so dramatic looking. It's like this big, kind of very nice looking, it almost looks like a piece of broccoli attached to like a spaceship of some kind. But in any case, I've always been intrigued by the artwork since I was a kid. I really like the card. I don't like it as much as like a Luster Dragon or an Injection Fairy Lily, for example, but it's up there. If it's not one of my top 5 favorites, it's definitely in my top 10 favorite cards from the Legacy of Darkness set. Okay, next up we have the Twin-Headed Behemoth. I don't really like this card much, guys. I mean, it's Yamada Dragon. Here we go, folks. I really like this card. I mean, find somebody. This is actually good. This is actually a good point, I think. Find somebody that's a collector of vintage era Yu-Gi-Oh cards that doesn't like the Yamada Dragon. I mean, everybody likes it. It's a cool artwork. It's got huge stats. It was the Noah Kaiba, kind of arguably his ace card in his duel there with Kaiba and then with Yugi towards the end of season 3. You could argue that the Shinado card that he's got from Dark Crisis is sort of his ace card there, King of a Higher Plane. Whatever, right? They're all really big cards and they're all pretty iconic. This is one of those artworks that I really enjoyed as a kid. I did pull one myself from a first edition pack when I was a kid. It's not this particular copy. It got kind of damaged. It's not really a gradable card anymore, but I really like the card. Next up we have Hino Kagu Suchi. It's a cool card. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. It's got sort of that cyberspace, sort of like spirit, pyro kind of artwork going for it. That's kind of fun. Okay, so the Asura Priest. A funny story on this. I picked this up from Troll and Toad maybe a couple of months ago. It was kind of expensive at the time, but I was like, hey, you know, the pop on this thing was actually pretty low for PSA 10. It's something, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's between somewhere like 11 and maybe 15 copies of PSA 10. So there's not like a ton of those out there. And unfortunately, a lot of them are locked up with some of these big collectors here in their registry sets. So for me, when I saw this come up on Troll and Toad, I was like, oh, well, I may as well just scoop it up because I don't know that I'm going to get another chance at this in a long time. Now here we go. This is arguably the kind of banner monster of the Legacy of Darkness set. It certainly is the most expensive card from Legacy of Darkness at the present moment. And it is one of my favorite cards from the set. I mean, put aside all the debates that people have about, you know, it's popular because it's popular or whatever. For me, that's not why it's popular. Like, I really enjoyed having this card as a kid. It was a very rare card back in the day. It was a very playable card back in the day that got destroyed by a lot of us who used it in our decks. It was also one of the first, you know, people talk about the underrepresentation of women, right? And some of these female characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! This card was like a pretty big deal in that respect as a secret rare. Came before the Dark Magician Girl in one of the later sets. So like, it had a lot of like interesting novelty and appeal to it, you know, back in the day, and it still does to this day. Like, I mean, people can debate about why it's popular or why it's cool. I liked it when I was like, whatever, like 10 years old or 9 years old when I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. and I still like it. It's a very iconic artifact of the Yu-Gi-Oh era, the vintage sets, and it's arguably one of the most popular secret rares of all of the 11 sets. It's right up there with things like, the Gate Guardian, or the Thousand Dragon, or, pick any of the major secrets from some of those original sets. It's like, this thing is up there. It's a new cert number. You can see it's a pretty fresh number there on this one, but very pleased to have that as part of the collection. This card is interesting, the Ryu Senshi. Some people pronounce these things differently, but in any case, I got this thing a long time ago, like in November, I think, or December of last year, and I haven't really seen a 10 come up at all. So there aren't a lot of 10s of this thing around, I guess, or whoever has them, they don't really want to part with them for some reason. So cool looking card for sure. It's got a nice real glow there on that artwork. And it's one of the only fusions, I believe, in this set that's like a super secret or ultra. It's one of my favorites. Oh, here we go. Here he is, folks. The Tyrant Dragon. I have gone to the ends of the earth, folks, to try and find a PSA 10 copy of this card. I've been knocking on doors on Instagram. I've been hitting people up on eBay right and left for the past 9 months, and I just can't get a PSA 10 copy of this thing. So I've kind of settled for the fact that I'm going to have a 9 in my registry set, and I'm never going to be able to get a PSA 10. So be it. You can't. I mean, there's only 7 PSA 10s in the world, and almost all 7 of those are locked up with these guys here. None of these guys are going to part with those things. So it's just, you got to work with what you have, and in my case, I've got a PSA 9. So be it. I mean, it is a good card, in my opinion. If somebody were to put this up for auction, and the right people were bidding on it, this thing could sell for more in a PSA 10 than possibly a Yatagarasu or a Yamada Dragon, or maybe even an Injection Fairy Lily. I mean, it depends on how many of these things go up for auction and how close they are together, and if it's a buy it now. I mean, this thing could sell for several $1,000s if the right person is interested in it. Here we go. Air Knight Parshoth. This is one of the oldest certs that I have in my Legacy of Darkness set so far. I like this card a lot. It's a mainstay, very popular, very playable. I have not been able to find this in a 10, so I've kind of settled for the 9. Next up, we have a drop-off. This is another thing that I kind of settled on to get as a 9. I haven't been able to find a 10, and I don't know that I'm going to find one at a price that I'd be willing to pay for it. So you just settle for what you have, what you can get. And we've got a copy of Last Turn as well. And this is the cover card, by the way, of Legacy of Darkness. So it's a big deal to have it in the collection. I don't think I'll ever own a 10 because I'll never get one at a price that I'll be happy to pay. So it's here, and it's a good card to have as part of the registry set. So all that said, I do have a ways to go before I'm going to be able to have this set complete. So my estimation, folks, is that I will probably have... I basically have all the commons covered. I have all of them. Many of them are at PSA already. I've sent them over the past 9 months. Many of them I'm still kind of debating which ones I'm ultimately going to send. And in some cases, I'm still trying to hunt down a crisp, really well-centered copy that I can send out to PSA to hopefully get a 9 or a 10 from the card. So this has been one of my longest videos in a while, folks. Let me give you some closing thoughts on my opinions about Legacy of Darkness and the registry set. So for starters, I got started on this registry set, folks, in November or December of last year. I've been building this up very slowly over the past 9 months. And I've paid some very high prices, unfortunately, for some of these cards because I've gotten into this whole registry set thing kind of late. So if you were to start this from ground zero, from the ground floor, so to speak, today, I don't even know, one of the reasons I got started with LOD is because doing this even 9 months ago for LOB or Metal Raiders is pretty hard. You'd have to buy a couple of boxes of Metal Raiders or LOB, or you would have to just buy up these, card by card by card. And for those original sets, it's extremely expensive. You're talking thousands and thousands of dollars if you were to try and do that for those original sets. For Legacy of Darkness, however, with all the commons, I've covered off on those at a very reasonable price. Some of those cost pennies to get in near mint condition or mint condition. if you're a savvy buyer and you know what you're doing. For some of these slabbed cards, they've been pretty expensive, obviously, but it's nowhere near as dramatic as what you'd have to deal with for Metal Raiders or Legend of Blue Eyes, maybe even Pharaoh's Servant and some of the very early ones there. So that's kind of why I got started on it. It's a little bit more of a value for your dollar than some of the very expensive stuff you'd need from those earlier sets. And I love it. I really like this set a lot. The cards are some of my favorite from all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's going to be unusual when this is completed. There's not going to be a lot of 100% completed LOD sets. I mean, you can see here, like, even some of these really big collectors, it's slow going on this set because it's really hard. And I think it'll be very differentiated and it's going to be a huge deal for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community when somebody reaches 100% on this LOD set. And I don't know who it's going to be. I mean, I presume some of these guys have a lot of those cards in the pipeline already at PSA, so they're probably gunning for the 100% completion in the next calendar year if they're lucky with PSA's return times. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there's a chance. We're very much in the race here, right? At 16%. We've got a pretty good set here as far as Legacy of Darkness is concerned. We've got a couple of the big monsters knocked out, so it should be smooth sailing from this point, mostly commons and supers and stuff. So I think that's it. I'm very excited to announce this collection achievement, that we've initiated the Legacy of Darkness set, that we are well on our way to having most of the big cards knocked out, and that I expect I will have a lot of very exciting updates about this set as I continue to build it. So be on the lookout in my PSA returns for more Legacy of Darkness stuff. I'm even going to be opening up some mail here in the next couple days with some more LOD cards to share with you all. So thanks for watching, folks. Let me know what you think about this Registry set, and appreciate your time. Feel free to leave comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.